Hi, my name is Susan Fox, and I've been honored by the Sequoia Park Zoo by being asked to be part of their conservation lecture series. So I'll be talking on December 13th about art and conservation in the land of blue skies, which is the country of Mongolia that I've visited numerous times over the years. And I specialize in Mongolian subjects for my art. So I'll be bringing some art, I'll be telling some stories of my adventures in the countryside, working with researchers, and I hope you'll be able to attend. I grew up in Humboldt County. I started out when I was 22 as a sign painter with Chuck Ellsworth at All Points, worked for him for 5 years, learned graphic design, worked as a freelance graphic designer for 15 years, lived in the San Francisco Bay Area for most of the 1980s. And when I was 35, I went back to school full-time and got a degree in illustration at the Academy of Art College, what was then the college in San Francisco. Moved back up here in 1990, got to spend 2 years studying oil painting with Mike Hayes. I didn't get to do that in art school. So by the time I got done working with Mike, I decided that that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to focus on my childhood dream of painting in oil, and I always loved to draw animals. So I became a wildlife artist. I took a master class with John Siri Lester's nationally known wildlife artist, and he was very encouraging. And so that is what I have done for the last 20-some years, getting into national juried shows and being fortunate in getting to travel to a lot of interesting places, Mongolia and parks in the United States. Been to England and went to Romania a few years ago, sat in a bear hide and got to see European brown bears. But Mongolia is my first love. That's my second home. It's an independent country, what we used to call Outer Mongolia. But I love to go there to draw and paint. And I've been very fortunate in how I've been able to travel around. I've brought 2 of my field journals and a sketchbook and a binder of watercolors that I've done on location there. So afterwards, if you're interested, you can come up to the front and see some of the work that I've done over there. I first went for the wildlife. Actually, it was an Earthwatch project, the 4th one that I did, and it was a mammal study. I was going to be a mammalogist. That didn't happen. And I ended up going back again and again, and got interested beyond the wildlife in just about every other aspect of the country. But sometimes it's even a vacation. That was actually from last year. I'm going back to this place now next year. This is a strictly protected area out in the far west, and I'll be talking more about that in a little bit. But this was at the end of what I'd gone there to help with, waiting for the vehicle, the van that was going to take us back down the hill, the Havd, so I could fly back to Ulaanbaatar. There's endless need, and there's limited time and resources. And so I've been to Mongolia 11 times in 13 years. I missed this year. It's the only second time I've missed since 2005. And I've got a lot of connections there of friends, and I understand. I've traveled extensively in the countryside. So there's so many NGOs here. You know, pretty much every species is covered, but not so much over there. So that's where I'm putting my effort. It's a place where one person who stays with it and is willing to contribute has a chance of really making a difference. And I don't do it alone. I've been there 12 times since 2005. And these are some of the drivers and guides and researchers that have helped me, given me information, have made me welcome over the years. So I want to give them credit. And this is a little bit about me. You can read it. I'm a member of Artists for Conservation and the Salmagundi Club in New York. I'm a fellow of the Explorers Club. I have a bachelor's in illustration from the Academy of Art. That's my technical training. And been in quite a few exhibitions. I enter juried shows every year, ship my art around the country. And then finally, as I say, I've been on 4 Earthwatch expeditions. And Earthwatch was how I got to Kenya, to Africa for the first time. And these are the scientists and researchers who that I know, some of whom have become friends, who have welcomed me to the research camps, answered my questions, told me what the behavior of an animal that I'd observed meant, what they were doing. And so I want to give them all the credit in the world, because these are also some of the people that gave me the Mongolia that I'm going to show you tonight. So this is Mongolia. It's a landlocked country between Russia and China. It has an extreme continental climate. It's twice the size of Texas, with a little over 3 million people, and it's almost all open range, almost no fences. It's actually the last great undiscovered camping destination, because you can head out into that countryside and you can camp pretty much anywhere that you want to. And perfect silence, no light pollution. It's a pretty amazing place as far as just being able to get out and away from it all. Now, as far as my conservation activities, I formed a nonprofit association, which some of you might find of interest. I looked into 501c3s. That was not the appropriate thing for me as far as the amount of time that it would take and the requirements. And in California, they adopted a model law for something called a nonprofit association. So it costs $10. You register it with the state Secretary of State, and it creates a legal entity for you. But you can't take nonprofit. You can't. People who donate money to you can't take a tax deduction. That's the main drawback to it. But it does create an umbrella organization. And so these are the things that I'm currently involved in, and I'll be talking about all of these as we move along. People find out I'm an artist. Artists are actually very well respected and held in high regard in Mongolia. So when I say, and I speak a little bit of Mongolian, when I say Bizorachban, I'm an artist. It's just like it lights up, and you slot into, they understand what that means, and it's respected. So the word got around I was an artist, and a couple of Kazakh guys came over and says, hey, we're artists, through a translator. And so we chatted a little bit, and I didn't know if I'd ever go back there, but it turns out that I am. This next year, I don't know the dates yet, probably in July, and I'll be doing the Argali capture. Dr. Rosenbaum has helped the local community build a community center in Delin, which is the Soom Center, what we would call a county seat. And they want to paint a mural on the wall. So my part of this is going to be to take their ideas. Do they want Argali? Do they want ibex? Do they want the deer stones or the mountains? And I'll come up with a design for them. And they sent me a scale drawing of the wall, the building. And then when I go back next year, I'll spend, I don't know how this is going to work, but I'll spend probably at least a day or two in the town while the local artists are painting the mural, and maybe I'll get my paintbrush out and I'll get to help paint that. And so I've brought up this idea to the director of Iknart and Cholo, and he's now interested in a mural for the headquarters for that nature reserve, which is the one that I always go to. So that may be something that I'm finding where I can use my art to help support conservation in Mongolia, is working with local artists to embellish buildings with scenes and the wildlife that they live with and that they see every day. The things that I specifically do to support conservation, since I'm shooting reference for my wildlife art, I think this last trip I took something like 11,000 images. And we've got how many terabytes? About
just under 3.5
terabytes of images. So I have two Nikon D750 camera bodies. One has a 28-300 lens. The other one has a 8400. And so I'm out there with this camera equipment, and everybody's going to see something different when they go out. So sometimes I get something that I think a researcher that I know could find useful, and so I've got a standing order for something that I'll show you in a few minutes. So I provide photographs if those are useful for researchers. I'm involved in a community near a nature reserve. Social media, I'm the admin for this nature reserve's Facebook page, so I change out the header and take care of the spammers and add new members. Do public presentations. I do my what I call my Wild Art Mongolia expeditions, and then I do my paintings, which is my way of communicating the Mongolia that I see through my art. So I first became aware of argali when I got an Earthwatch expedition catalog in 2004, and I decided to go to Mongolia, which is the home country for these animals, which is doing to a research camp that is doing a study on them. So in the spring of 2005, I traveled to Mongolia for 2 weeks to a reserve with 9 other people. We stayed in Mongolian gers, which we were taught to call yurts, and we were out every day, high of 32 degrees, and I just had the most wonderful time. I'd never heard of these sheep before, but we saw a lot of them, and as time has gone on, I go back to that reserve every year now, and I'm actually involved in helping support a women's felt craft collective there, and I have my own ger. I bought a ger last year, so I'm allowed to stay in the reserve and go out and walk on my own. It's a wonderful place where I can go out by myself as a woman traveling on her own to try to see the argali, and there's also ibex and a variety of birds and other mammals there. So I'm going to feature argali, Ovis ammon, because that's the animal that took me to Mongolia the first time on this Earthwatch project. I have Mongolian argali in the research guide. There's a picture of this sheep's head. I had absolutely no idea what they were. But they are the world's largest mountain sheep. The largest ram that they've radio collared at Cholo Nature Reserve, which is where the Earthwatch project, and it's still doing Earthwatch teams there if you're interested, was 374 pounds. So, but the rams generally can weigh over 300 with that horn curl of 65 inches. They are, I'm trying to remember what the IUCN, they're actually in pretty good shape in Mongolia as far as not being endangered. When I first went there in 2005, they estimated a population of 400 of them. And when I was there last year, it's up to 800 to 1,000. So the work that's been done in this reserve for the conservation of species is looking pretty successful. And I've gone back there every year, and they've become a favorite subject of mine. I'd never thought about painting wild sheep before, but I've learned a lot about them. I've learned about their behavior. I've gotten to watch them in different seasons, and I've just gotten to the point where they are one of my favorite subjects. There are 2 populations. The one I'm most familiar with is the Gobi argali, and then last year I went out to the west and I saw the Altai argali, which look a little bit different than the Gobi argali, and I'm going to be interested in getting more reference and being able to talk to the researchers and find out, if there are morphological differences between these 2 populations. The main organization that I support is Cholo Nature Reserve, which is the first place that I went. I stayed involved there. I helped set up a women's felt craft collective in 2009, and I'm hoping to see the women again when I go there next year. I also know the director. He was on the Earthwatch project the very first time I went. We've stayed in touch all these years. He's the leading argali researcher, so he studies the wild sheep. So that's the #1 priority. This is at Cholo, which Ich is great or big. Nart is Mongolian for sun. The IIN creates a possessive. Cholo is rocks. So this is Great Sun's rocks. It's a very large area of an upland with rocky formations that I'll show you in a little while. The person that runs the Earthwatch projects did her master's on grazing overlap, and she told us about that when we were on the project. And I ended up with this photo that demonstrates what she found, which is the overlap between the argali, ibex, and the domestic livestock is essentially 100%. They're all using the same resources in this reserve. And I was down the valley from the research camp, and I ended up with a photograph of an argali and an ibex nanny and cattle in the background. So the director, there's a standing order from the director that when I'm there, any pictures like this that I get, he wants, because it helps him communicate to the community the fact that the wildlife is using the same resources as their livestock. And I found that I have the only photographic documentation of an argali swimming a river. This is at another nature reserve, Gongolot, which is about 2 hours east of Ulaanbaatar. So I was there with a driver guide. I'd gotten a $5,000 grant from Artists for Conservation to go to 3 places with Argali and help set up a women's felt craft collective at Icknart. And so we were at Gungalo, and I had a driver guide who spoke English, and we got out in the morning, and he started to glass the hillside, and I thought, well, he's going to see the sheep long before I do, so what the heck. So I turned 180, look out over the river valley, and I spot 4 Argali. I thought, wow, that's good. And then I watched this whole little drama with the horses. The Argali wanted to go this way, and the horses kept blocking them. And it was almost like a little soap opera. And so finally, they kind of came down to the river. I didn't have this good camera equipment at the time, so these pictures are a little fuzzy. And all of a sudden, with no warning, one jumped in to the river. And it startled the other ewes so much that they turned and ran. And this Argali, that's a close-up of the previous photo, swam right across the river, almost straight toward me. She's come out on the other side. The other Argali are taking off. One split off. They're trying to get down to this up the river. And this one stops because there's camels out there. So now they've got horses on one and they've got camels on the other. And she finally takes off. This is the one that crossed the river, going back up the mountain as fast as she can run. And finally, the other ones got past the horses. And there's actually a couple of demoiselle cranes there in the background. They took one look, and then they headed on up the mountain. So that was how that day started, right after breakfast. And then this is to give you some idea of the kind of wildlife view and the kind of experiences you could have, particularly at Icknart and Cholo, where there's no hunting. And especially in the valley where the research camp is, they're not really afraid of people. They don't instantly just take off out of the valley. So I was walking down the valley. This is desert steppe. This is a desert steppe ecosystem. And that's what you see. They're looking at you. They've already seen you before you see them. And I think, well, that one's going to just go, he's going to go away. But he didn't. He came out on the rock. And now I've got the good camera equipment. So we're looking at each other. And he kind of walked around a little, and the rocks kind of go up. There's draws in between. So in plain view of him, I went up the rocks, the next rocks over from him, and he didn't seem to care. He just started sniffing a rock. And then he stretched. He actually did that twice. And this is off to my right behind me, the research camp with 7 gears, 2 shipping containers. People are behind those trees, and you can see someone at the spring down there. So all this is going on while all of that is just a short distance away. He scratched. He sniffed his rock again. He looked at me. I looked at him. I did some sketches of him. He knew I was there. He laid down with his back to me and just started looking out across the valley. And then 2 more Argali came down the valley. And he got up to watch them. They stopped and looked around. And then they headed on up the other side. And he watched them go. And that was kind of, that was an hour with him. And I thought that was enough. That was really a gift. And so I left. But I knew I was going to get a painting, and this is the painting that I did. It's called A Good Stretch. And I would know him if I saw him again because he's got that spot on his horn where the ribbing has come off. So this is the opportunity that I had to really get involved with the local community. Icknart is Our Future, is a women's craft collective. And that started with an idea that at the time I was volunteering with in touch with the Denver Zoo, who had done the Earthwatch project. And I was interested in staying involved, and they said they had this idea for doing this collective, and I said I'd be willing to help with that because they said they didn't have staff or a budget for it. So there was an arrangement made to have meetings, and the Argali researcher who had also been on the Earthwatch project, he went around and told all the people that this American woman was coming. She was going to bring a felt press, and that we were going to help them start this this collective. So we didn't know if anyone would show up, because this is summertime, it's the busiest time of year. 14 women came for 3 days, their families, everyone pitched in to fill in, to cover their work so that they could come to, it was very humbling for me, because they didn't know who I was. And 3 incredible days with the women who had already formed an organization, had already taken a 5-day felt making workshop, brought me a 14-page proposal about which I brought with me because I was going to loan them the money for the felt press. And they were ready to go. And everyone told me, oh, you're going to have to hold their hands, you're going to have to tell them everything. They were together. That collective is still going on. And I've stayed in town, I've stayed in the homes, I've gotten to, they're friends on Facebook. So they made that rug in 3 days, hand embroidered. So this is Mongolian style embroidery with camel hair yarn. These are some of the things they'd made before and that they made while we were there meeting with them. This was in 2009. That's the felt press. So a few years later, I came back and I went into the town and they had a work day for me. And the women came in from the countryside for the day. And they got me in helping create felt so that they could do pictorial images on them. They were working on hats and slippers. And it was the most fantastic day that I had with them. And I'm looking forward to seeing them again next year. So I decided I wanted to do something more structured as far as supporting conservation in Mongolia, and I wanted to try to get other people to come over and see this place, particularly artists. And so I created what I call the Wild Art Mongolia expeditions. And the idea is using art to support conservation. So this was the one I did last year. This is the Argali Capture Project. I was just on Skype with Barry and planning for next year. I'm going to be helping with a mural in the local community out there, along with going out on the Argali project again. So this is out in far western Mongolia. This is in the general area where, these are Kazakh majority, so this is eagle huntress territory, if you've seen the movie. This is where we stayed, set up camp in this valley. This is getting organized to go out and round up the sheep. So they hired Kazakh horsemen, and there was word that there was a big herd, maybe 200 animals out there somewhere. They could just find them. These are some of the guys, the horsemen. They're characters sometimes. And they're getting ready to go out. And the crew from Iknart, because they do Argali captures there, they came out from UB with Ulaanbaatar with their nets, and this is the nets being thrown out onto the ground, and the stakes being brought out on a motorbike. And then it was when they were doing this, the sun was going down. It wasn't a great angle, but they were setting up two lines of netting, almost 100 yards long. So it took quite a while to do it. And then at the end, they dropped them all to the ground. And I just thought, oh, no, we just put that all up. But they didn't want animals getting caught at night. So it'd come out the next day. The light there was just absolutely spectacular. This is the Hok Serkan Noro strictly protected area. That's the highest level of protection. 15% of Mongolia's land is a protected area, either nature reserve, national park, a strictly protected area. And this is what you see on the hillside, way up high, Argali. Or you see just here, you learn to spot that silhouette of the thing that doesn't match the pattern, are those thin legs. That's the director of the strictly protected area. The mosquitoes are really, really, really bad. And that's the mosquito netting hood that I've got on my hat. And they're setting up the nets the next day. Weather would roll through. It never actually rained. But we were sitting on the ground waiting, and I got to watch these cloud formations. So there go the horsemen. They're riding out. And so I ended up being designated the official photographer because I had the Argali researcher from Iknart had brought his crew out here, and so I knew him, and he knows I've got camera equipment. So I was the photographer. So they set me up at one end. This is where I could see all the way down the net line. And then this is some volunteers, and this is sort of final instructions. So what people had to do is go out to a designated spot, lay flat on the ground on their stomachs, and not move for however long it took before, if some argali were driven down the hill. And I was lucky. They put me behind a clump of grass, so I at least got to sit up. And that was my view of where they thought the sheep were going to come down. And that's my view of looking down the net line with one of the rangers from Icknart. Mongolian lark landed. I ended up drawing some rocks. This is where they told me there would be sheep. But you know, I really couldn't get the scale of it. The air is so clear in Mongolia, it's kind of like Grand Tetons. Things seem closer than they are. And then that's Anand, one of the rangers from Icknart. And all of a sudden, sheep just come pouring over the hillside. It's a big herd of ewes and lambs. That's what it looked like, coming down that hillside toward the nets. And then they stop. And then, you know, it's like elephants, the matriarch. There's the old ewe, the canny old ewe knew something wasn't right, and that's her heading over. And you can see now the herd has split, and the ones that are coming over, they're following her. The rest of them are milling around a little bit, a little confused. They all start to take off over the hill, and Anand says, "Susan," and then he points back behind me. I look behind me, and I see this. And I counted later on, that's about 30 of them, split off before they even got to the top of the hill, and they ran at eye level right behind me. So I was taking pictures as fast as I could, and they just ran on by, and that's the ones on the hill going over the hill, and then that was kind of the last, you know, I saw them. So that was kind of that, and so this was the, well, what happened, how did things go? That's Dr. Amgalanbadar Sukhin, the Argali researcher, is the director of Icknart. That's someone he went to university with. Dr. Rosenbaum, Barry Rosenbaum, is behind. So they got, that was kind of the end of it. There wasn't a capture. It's just, you just never know how things are going to work out. But I am going to get a chance to go out again next year. So we go back to camp, and it's the last day, and it's time for group photos. And so I asked, the Kazakh guys were all kind of hanging around, and I said, you know, can I get a picture with them? And they walked off. And I thought, well, I guess that means the answer is no. But they're horsemen. They had just gone to get their horses. So they came back, and they actually set up that themselves and had me come, please, stand in the middle. This was an Explorers Club flag expedition. Flag 179, which has been to 35 countries since the mid-1950s. So it was kind of intimidating to carry it out to Mongolia. So I have my picture with them, and then this is the crew from Icknart and Barry with a Kazakh ger in the background. And it was a good experience other than the mosquitoes. Which Barry says have never been that bad before and have not been that bad since. So we'll see what happens. So when I saw these photos, I knew I was going to want to do a painting. And I start by doing sketches, leg positions, just making sure I understand the anatomy. And then I came up with a composition that I liked, and I turned it into this. It's called On the Run, and that's the sacred mountain in the strictly protected area in the background. It's 36 by 48. So this was the first one. And Tach are Przewalski's horse, Equus ferus. They're the only remaining genetically wild horse. American Mustangs are feral domestic horses. They are not socialized to people, but they are not a wild animal. The Przewalski's horse is truly a wild animal, and they've been reintroduced in 3 places to Mongolia. I've been to all of them. This was the first release site in Takhantal. A stallion was seen at a water hole in 1969, and they were declared extinct in the wild at that point. And after World War II, only 54 remained in captivity, descended from 13 founder animals. So there's around 2,000 now. So this was the one that was really was an expedition to get to. We got there, and I'd love to, I could do a talk just on talk. Prague Zoo has shipped a lot of horses to Mongolia over the years and to Takental, and these mares had recently arrived, and you can see the fence. It's an acclimation pen that they would be kept in for a year while they got used to -40 winters, 120-degree summers. It's very different than in the Czech Republic. But just before we got there, something interesting happened. This guy shows up. So he's a young stallion. He's not studly enough yet to take over a family group. He managed to get into the fence. So he was in with these mares. So he's got it. I think this guy's got it made. Yeah, they're fenced. So he's got a harem. And then, so we went out driving. We found this family group. So they used to be called harems, and the nomenclature has changed to family groups. And there's a dominant stallion, and there's a lead mare. So we was able to get fairly close to them. It's a beautiful but rather stark environment. You can see there's foals there, and they're keeping them either between them or behind them as they keep an eye on us. And that just gives you a little better idea of the landscape. We were there in the spring, early part of the year. Actually, no, that one, it's been so. This was in the late part of the year. This was getting on into September, so it wasn't too hot. We went down to a water hole. This is Hulan, Mongolian wild ass, and this is about as close as you get. They always, I guess, have been shy, but they've been hunted and hunted now, and they just run. So that's a number of different family groups that all come down to drink and graze a little, and now they're done, and now they're heading out to wherever they're going to spend the night. And this is the painting, which is here, that I did of that young stallion. And this was called Moving the Harem. Now I'm going to have to rename it. But what this shows is the mare is in the front. She leads. She decides when they go, where they go. The stallion brings up the rear so he can see the entire family group, because he has to be able to defend his family group from wolves for sure. And well, not snow leopards, not where these horses are. Wolves are going to be the main predator. And you see them with scars, not from just fighting each other, but maybe there's a scar on the haunch. The wolves will come in behind and try and grab. I've seen that at Hustai, one of the other places where the horses are. And this is the newest, this is the third and the newest release site at Homintal, which is to the north of Takental. And this is a project by Claudia Fay, who won the Rolex Award for Enterprise. She had studied Camargue horses and then found out about the Przewalski's horses. And it took her 20 years to breed a genetically healthy population that she could get her program off the ground, which was established in 2004. And I was able to go to it in 2006 when there were 22 horses there. And I was able to go back in 2015, and there are now 54 horses. And so this is in a river valley. It's sort of steppe desert with some mountains. There's a river, the river there. The river is off in this side of those far mountains. And that's kind of the landmark mountain. So this has been fenced. This valley where these horses are has been fenced. To keep them separate from the livestock it's just easier to keep good community relations if they can't mingle. Gazelles can get in and out, small mammals can get in and out, but the horses stay. It's a very large area, but it is fenced, and it's the only one of the three that is. And you can see down here a figure. That's Florian, a French researcher volunteer, and his job was to go out 3 family groups to see a predetermined number, 2 at a time, follow them for an hour wherever they went, specific behavioral observations that he wrote down and recorded. And he let me go with him. So I'm walking with my camera, high-def video in it, and was just able to walk along next to these horses. No fear. That's the stallion. So now, unlike the ones at Talkental, they have been kept approachable by humans that they know. Claudia wants to be able to inspect them for health without having to tranquilize them. So it's not like they walk up to them and stick their hands in their mouths, but they would let me, a stranger, just walk along next to them from me to you. And this is Kronos. And it turned out he had a good-sized harem with foals on the ground. It turns out he was there in 2006. He was part of the first shipment in 2004. Imagine that. He was still alive after all these years. And there's they call the old mare. So in the wild, in this extreme environment, that's how tough these horses are. And they came from the Czech Republic. They weren't born in Mongolia. So I did a portrait of him. He had a really interesting, calm demeanor about him. I hope he's still alive. He was getting up there. He was limping a little bit, but it was such a thrill to see a horse that had been there and survived all this time. So this is the one from 2014. I had not seen the steppe, the grassland steppe that used to extend almost from the Pacific to Hungary. It's almost all gone. The largest remaining areas of it are in eastern Mongolia, and the largest protected area is Tosen-Holste Nature Reserve. But before we got there, we stopped for lunch, and there were a pair of endangered white-naped cranes there. I got a picture of them taking off. So there's about 5 crane species. International Crane Foundation is very involved in crane conservation in Mongolia. And they talked about camping. So here we are in the reserve. They knew we were coming, and there was a spring nearby. And so you set up, protected from the wind, and always on a few degrees slope at least because of rain. So that was where we set up. I think we were there for 3 or 4 nights. And this is looking from the camp kind of out. The spring is nearby. That's an ava. And you can see how the grass just extends out for as far as you can see. So this is a happy place for me. Rolling down an earth road in Mongolia with a driver. Maybe they start singing. They have great voices. And I don't have to be anywhere. I don't have to do anything. I can just be in this place rolling across the countryside. So that's the grassland steppe. We had some run right by the car, Mongolian gazelles. Saw an endangered soccer falcon. Saw some really interesting cloud formations. Fortunately, that one didn't rain on us. And then this is Gonbold, one of the rangers came, and through the guide, I was able to interview him about his work. And we visited the park headquarters, the reserve headquarters. And we saw how they do community relations work. And they have a botanical collection of plants. And saw a lot of gazelles. The light wasn't very good. It was the rainy season until we were leaving last day on our way out of the reserve. The one gazelle really came out into this very, very nice light. Oops. So that's road travel. When I first went there in 2005, there were 48,000 miles of road in Mongolia, and 1,900 of it was paved. And people say there's no roads, but these are the roads, the earth roads. And if you're in a Russian van, you can go anywhere in the country. And so that says, let's go, to me. And then there's this part of it. Oh, come on. Because it had rained. And This is the main east-west road, so I think this has been paved now, but this is what Mongolia is facing as far as economic development, partly is because lacking road infrastructure, which is finally, as they say, is finally being addressed. But good driver, he likes to drive fast. I've been out with him before, but he was being really, really careful, and just all of a sudden, all 4 tires let go, and we almost did a 180. And I was sitting next to him, and we just kind of looked at each other, and oh, that was interesting, wasn't it? And he just sort of grinned. And on we went. So this is last year. Gobi bear. How many of you have heard of the Gobi bear? It's the world's rarest bear. Okay, all right. So it's a grizzly, and the estimate is that there are 44 in the world. I'm reading Doug, I keep wanting to say Craighead, and it's Doug Chadwick's book on Gobi bear right now. I knew we probably wouldn't see, almost certainly wouldn't see them, but if I see the habitat with my illustration background and I have reference, I can create an image of the animal where they live. But on the way in, this is a long way. So we were so far south into this strictly protected area that we were within 50 kilometers of the Chinese border, and we had to get a special permit to be that close. So that's really very far south to an oasis called Shar Ols. But before we even got there, out in the distance, this is almost full magnification, camels. These are wild Bactrian camels. They are morphologically somewhat different than the domestics. And that actually, it's pretty recent that that's been determined. The person that runs the tour company that I've booked with since 2006, when I told him, as I sent him a picture, Jan, look what we saw. He says, he's Swedish. He says, there was a French film crew. They came here. They filmed the camels. They were here for 2 years. They never saw one. We're on our way through this. This is just passing through, and a herd of 16 runs right across the road in front of the cars. So we stopped, and then they stopped, and so that's enough for me to do a painting if I do additional research. There's a breeding station, and if I can get the close-up reference. So I would like to do a painting of these camels in this setting. So that was really, really special. This is something almost no one gets to see, except the researchers that are going in and out every year might. But to have seen a herd of wild camels when there's so few, that was really good. That probably used up our animal luck. So this is also travel in Mongolia. You can see there's nothing for as far around as you can see. And that's a Russian furgon van. Those go anywhere. The engine's between the front seats so that if it's minus 30 and the engine conks out, you can work on it without having to get out of the car. And so we were out, we were seeing snakes and little animals and bones and things while these guys worked on it. So it turned out what happens is in Mongolia, the gas comes in and it goes into tanker trucks, which have all kinds of crud inside. And those trucks go to the petrol stations and unload their gas into the gas station tanks with the crud inside. And then vans come in and fill up their tanks with the crud, and then it eventually blocks the fuel line, and the van overheats, and you end up sitting out wherever you've ended up stopped for a while with just a sort of a rest stop while they out the fuel line. So you can basically field strip those and rebuild them, but we were able to also travel in Land Cruisers, which are definitely more comfortable. That was our camp. This is the research camp in Shar Ols. The oasis is off to the right, and we'd missed the researchers by about 48 hours, but they gave us permission to use their camp. So this is where Gobi Bear lives. And a ranger came with us, led us in, stayed for a couple of nights, took us on a hike over those hills into the valley behind, and on our way in, we saw tracks. So those are tracks of the world's rarest bear, which the Mongols call matsalai. We also saw poop. I photograph, this is why I have 11,000 photographs, is I take pictures of everything. And another track, very clear track. So I'd hoped we had gotten there in time that they'd come out of hibernation and they would be at the feeding stations. And that's been kind of controversial, but they do need all the support. It's a very extreme environment. But the rhubarb, which is wild rhubarb, is one of their favorite foods. And the rhubarb, there'd been some rain or something. Anyway, the rhubarb had come up early and the bears had headed out. So there was now a less than zero chance of seeing them. But to see the tracks was really exciting because we knew we were where they had been. And this is one of the feeding stations. The ranger's checking the motion camera. If you go on Facebook, there's a Mausolei, there's groups, there's pages for the Gobi bear. And when they come back from the field, they'll post photos if they've captured any bears or they've spotted them up in the hills. And it's some kind of grain pellet that they feed them. So this is me in Gobi bear habitat. This is, back down there is the road that's the oasis. There's actually surface water running down the road back in those trees. And that's where we saw that one paw print. So the feeding station is behind the photographer. So this is where these bears come. This is a spring. Springs are sacred in Mongolia. It's right down in here. Only time I drink water out of the ground is in Mongolia from the springs. And that I will do. They don't have giardia is that how you say it? Giardia? Yeah, it's not in the water there. So if it's a fast flowing river with bare rocks, that water is also safe. And then this steppe ribbon racer came right through the camp, up over this partially buried kind of gear-like structure that was used for the kitchen, up over the roof of that, down along the ground, and then just paused. I guess he's just being invisible. And there's only 4 species of snakes in Mongolia. Only one is poisonous, the columbar viper, and it wouldn't kill you, it'd just make you uncomfortable. But this is the second one of these we'd seen. And that was nice to be able to get some good pictures. So now, Icknart and Cholo. This is the research camp. And it's grown over the years from the one container and 3 gears. The rock is called Camel Rock. It can be seen from all around. So when you're out, always take a GPS, but you can always use that as a landmark to find your way back to the camp. There's usually people there. There's Earthwatch teams starting in the spring and into August. This was spring in Mongolia. This is a spring dust storm. So this is April of 2005. Never got above 32. 10 of us in a gear, men and women, sleeping on the floor, 2 weeks, out all day. Absolutely loved every minute of it. We'd been out doing the first ever transect population survey, and we were going to get to visit a herder family, and we were going to have Mongolian barbecue, and we were all laying in the gear waiting, and it was just like somebody turned off the lights. The gear just went pitch dark, and then it turned orange. And I peeked out the door, and I thought, I've got to get pictures of this. And you can see the little, this is just the little sparkles here. That's the flash bouncing off the dust particles. So we thought, it all worked out. We didn't get the visit, but we did have the Mongolian barbecue. All of a sudden the doors flung open, and the Mongols and the researchers and the Earthwatch all came in, and we had a great afternoon. And then the next morning, it was like it had never happened. It was a clear, calm, sunny day. And you just think, you'd look at your pictures because you think, well, did I dream that yesterday? So this is my gear last year. I went to the market with the director of the reserve who was on that Earthwatch team, has become a good friend. And I had this idea that maybe I could do this thing. And so we bought a 4-wall gear. It's about 16 feet in diameter, and set it up in a place that he approved of near another herder family. That's the inside of it. Lived in it for a week. Just worked out, it's sort of a final exam. Do I really understand the pattern in Mongolia of how you live in a place like this without running water, without any of the conveniences that we take for granted? You can live perfectly comfortably in a ger like this. So they brought me a couple jerry cans of water from the spring. I had a life straw filter into a clean container. The rock is to hold the gear down in high winds. They're not staked down, so that rock is really important, really important. Running water in the sink, the little lid comes off, pour water into the little container and pull it up, and I've got running water. And a little one-burner butane, little can butane cooktop. And I had a great time, so I'm hoping to do that again next year. This is Icknart. It's one of the great places to go walking, I think, in the world. You can walk out. So unlike Africa, where you have to stay in the car and there's things that will eat you, in Mongolia, you can come to a place like this, take a GPS bottled water snack camera, and you can just walk for the entire day, anywhere you want. As a woman, I do this by myself. So this is a relatively safe environment for adventurous women who want to go somewhere on their own and not have to do guest tour, package tours. The tour company has self-guided trips where you can go to their tourist gear camp here on your own. They have departures every day, and you can go by yourself. They've got a car, they'll take you out, but you can just walk out here. So another reason why Mongolia is very special to me. Wonderful sunsets in the moonrise, passing summer rainstorm. That's an ibex. Ibex tend to stay up on the very tops of the rocks. Argali are a couple floors down, lower usually. That's a nanny ibex with a radio collar. So I wasn't all that far away. They're very tolerant. It was a group of them. That's a big old Billy ibex. This was in 2011 with the driver guide and another artist. We were walking down this canyon, Red Rock Canyon, and he just came out of nowhere, out from under an overhang, and just stopped on the trail right in front of us and just stood there checking us out. So got some good pictures of him. This is a tolai hare. There's a few members of the Lagomorph family in Mongolia, I think 4, but this is the only rabbit or hare. That's a pika, and they do what pikas everywhere do, is they tell everybody in the neighborhood when you walk by. And I couldn't take a step. This one year, they were everywhere, and black kites were everywhere. It was just one of those population ups, and I've never seen it like that before or since. And they lay out their vegetation to dry for the winter, just like you read about in storybooks. This used to be called a Cenarius vulture. It's now called a Eurasian black vulture. This is a juvenile in an elm tree at Icknart. This is a major, major nesting location for them. I think there's over 100 nests. One of the things that's interesting about them here is that there are Korean vulture researchers who, up near the DMZ, it's effectively a wildlife refuge. There's not people there. And they saw one that had this big white tag on it. And it was a male juvenile from Icknart. So what they learned, because they had GPS locators on them, is the young guys leave Icknart for the winter and head out to near the DMZ in South Korea to hang out. Not the adults, not the females, just these young males. So that's, yeah, so it's, and they come back. So it's just a trip out and back for the winter. And recently, a new organization got off the ground called the Mongolian Bonkar Dog Project. Bonkar is not a breed, but a land race of the traditional herder's dogs. So they look kind of like a Tibetan Mastiff, black and tan. And they're big and they can be very aggressive. And what was thought was that they were what are called ger dogs. They hang around, what we learned to call yurts. The Mongols called gers. Ger is their word for home. And that's what they did, was they guarded the gers. And they weren't really livestock dogs. But it turns out that this organization, instead of introducing the use of these dogs as livestock guardians, they've found that they're actually reviving a tradition that had almost died out during what the Mongols call socialist times, when they were a communist country. So what they're doing is they did DNA tests to get pure Bangkar, and they are breeding them actually near Hustai National Park, where they have a setup there with, I'm not sure how many dogs at this point, but they're breeding them, and then they're contacting herders in different parts of the country. And actually, Iknard is now one of the places that they're working with people. And they're placing these older pups with them and bonding them to the sheep. So they're livestock guardian dogs. That's a well-known thing. And one of the people that made it, the connection, the main person that made the connection for wildlife was Lori Marker with the Cheetah Conservation Fund in Namibia. And actually, I know her. We're both members of the Explorers Club, so I've gotten to chat with her a number of times. And so she brought in, I think it was Anatolian shepherds to help cut down cheetah predation. So in 3 years of the Mongolian Bangkar Dog Project, they've already had dogs that they've placed with herders cut predation by almost 100%. And the predator of interest that this is helping conserve are snow leopards. Yeah, so one of the most charismatic big cats. And they think there's maybe 1,500 to 2,000 of them in Mongolia. I think that's the estimate. But they come down out of the mountains in the wintertime because they're hungry, and goats and sheep are in a winter enclosure, so they're easy pickings. But with the dogs now, someone might lose 30 animals in a month. Now they lose none, or maybe one. So this dog project I love dogs, I love animals. You saw my collies, our collies. And now it's a chance to help with snow leopard conservation also. This is an organization I've recently gotten involved with, the Mongolian Bangkar Dog Project. Bangkar is the traditional herding guardian dog of the Mongol herders, and they're breeding. This project is breeding them. This is temporary quarters outside of Ulaanbaatar. The plan is they thought they were creating a new thing, but they're reviving a tradition of these dogs not just guarding the gers, the herders' homes, but being livestock guardian dogs. And that had been suppressed as something that herders did for a number of reasons during communist times. So they're placing them with herders to help cut their livestock losses. And Mongols really believe that wildlife has as much right to live on the land as they do, has as much right to be there. So only if they're really pushed hard by predation will they go out and hunt down wolves or snow leopards. So if you've lost 30 animals over a month or so and you're trying to get your kid through university, then plus desertification is an issue. There's too many animals for the land there now. So this project is to place these. This is one of the breeding males. They're actually, they will chase you 200 yards in the countryside, biting at your tires. You do not get out of a car in front of a garret in Mongolia without saying, "Nakoi ga," hold the dog. And they are not kidding. These dogs can be incredibly aggressive. So we go here, where they've been raised from puppies, and they're just, you would never guess that these are the same dogs that you just live in fear of getting bitten by because your trip's over because they're not vaccinated. So her name is Bangkar. She caught my eye. There was something about her I really liked. So I've kind of followed her story. She's in the Gobi now, and she's guarding with a herder family, and she's guarding that family's animals. So they had to come up with a whole protocol to bond the dogs to the livestock. And now they found some herders who still had those dogs, and they're learning from them how the Mongols do it. And of course, this is something that happens in many countries. It could happen in the United States, in the West, the whole predator issue here. Livestock guardian dogs would solve the problem. In Mongolia, it's one of the breeding males. That's how they weigh them, carefully. So what they're trying to do is reduce, if they can reduce predation, it reduces the killing of endangered animals like snow leopards. It, with luck, over time will, the herders won't feel the need to have so many animals to make up for the losses. And then with luck, that's the end game there for the project, is to try to, if not halt, but at least stop the rate of advance of desertification in Mongolia. So we went out to a family that had the dogs. And there he is, 9 months old. And they weren't sure what he was, how far he'd gotten. He's still pretty young. And we all just sat there and watched. And he went off to his flock and he settled down, did exactly with his back to them, looking around, doing exactly what he's supposed to do. That's his owner. And it was interesting. The Mongols are not sentimental about animals, but he just sat there. He stroked that puppy and scritched it, and he really obviously felt very affectionate toward it. So now I'm going to show you some of what I do in the field. Sketches. Some of these, I've got a couple of my journals here. I use moleskin sketchbooks. These are drawings from live camels, live animals. This was at Icknart. It was really, 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 really hot, and they have a gazebo now, and they bring in the horns and the skulls, and so I just went and got a pile of them and took them out to the gazebo and just sat in the shade and sketched them. And when we're traveling, we stop for lunch. Sometimes I just play a little game with myself. No matter where we stop, no matter what it is, I'll find something to draw. So I'll do a quick sketch. These are some more finished ones of birch trees. There's a black kite nest in this one. There was a huge colony of them in this grove. So do wildflower studies. I journal every trip, and I blog about them, sometimes 8 to 12 parts to cover a really, this is out in Tosin Holstay, wildflowers from the steppe. This was out in western Mongolia. Kazakh people also build these rectangular structures, use as a kitchen or living space besides their gers. This was when I was waiting for the sheep to get driven over the hill. I mentioned I just sat and drew rocks. Those are the rocks that I drew. Waiting, waiting, waiting. And then I do watercolors in the field. That's Jarhalan Harhan Ol in Har Usnur National Park. I did the pencil drawing the night before. I had my watercolors ready, and I got up at sunrise, which is actually a moonrise, at about 6 in the morning to do this painting. And this is dunes, very far north of where you'd normally expect to see dunes. This is at Icknart, looking down the valley out to the steppe beyond. Icknart rocks, gotten pretty good at those. And then these are some of the paintings that have come out of the trip. So this one, another processed one. I love that horn curl. It's not split, broken, anything, but the light's very flat. Remember these guys from earlier this evening? So this one, you can see shadow side. This is an illustration of shadow side, shadow, light. So I took the light pattern there with the horn curl, and I did that painting. And after I did On the Run, I realized I'd actually for now said everything I want to say about animals in a landscape. That's about 90% landscape, 10% animals. I've drawn animals since I could hold a pencil. So I decided over the last couple of years, been thinking about it, I want to go back to just doing animals. I want to take a little more contemporary approach. So I'm bringing in other things I love, lettering and historic decoration. So I'm using Mongolian motifs. That's Bichik lettering. That's the Mongolian vertical script that Chinggis Khan chose from the Uyghur people to give the Mongols an alphabet because they'd been an oral culture before then. And I know a calligrapher in Mongolia. I send him words, he letters them, sends me the JPEGs. And then I worked in a sign shop for 5 years here when I was in my 20s. So I can transfer those and letter them in, reletter it with a brush and paint. This is another Argali. So I always try to paint an individual. So they're always, in a way, always portraits. So the other species that's really caught my time and attention and my creative energy is the world's only surviving species of true wild horse. And we learned to call them Przewalski's horse. after Nikolai Przewalski, who was an explorer that went all over Central Asia for the Tsar of Russia. He was crossing the border and he was given a hide and a skull, and he knew it was a previously unknown species of horse, so he took it back to Russia, and that in fact proved to be the case. So they were extinct in the wild as of 1969, but there were 54 left in captivity by the end of World War II. When Mongolia became a democracy in 1990, a German businessman wanted to curry favor with the government, and he arranged to have them reintroduced into Mongolia, and that was the first site in Western Mongolia. There's two more since then. There's one that's 2 hours from the capital called Hustai National Park. Lots of visitors are able to go there. And this is the only place in the world, Mongolia is, where you can see the true wild horses running free in their native habitat. So I always drew horses as a kid. Anybody who really knows horses has heard of the Przewalski's horse, which the Mongols call Takh, which means real special or sacred, blessed. And I've been able to sketch them. I've been able to walk in the park and do watercolors. The people that run the park kind of know who I am now. I've been there quite a few times. And I've also been to the other two places where they've been released also. So they're a real special animal, and as I say, Mongolia is the only place in the world where you can see them running free. These are the Takh. These are the domestic horses. This was actually in the members show at the Salmagundi Club, just got it back. That's a horse I saw at Icknart. That's a Saiga antelope. Have you heard of Saiga antelope? There was a big die-off in Kazakhstan. There's a subspecies, Saiga tatarica mongolica, in the West, and the estimate's, I think, 8 to 10,000, and they lost 4,000 to a livestock-borne disease last winter. Facebook was not a happy place on some days, but they can breed back up very quickly. This was a young one that let me get fairly close. These are Takh at Hustai National Park, which is only 2 hours from Ulaanbaatar. So if you go to Mongolia, 2 hours, almost all of it on paved road. They've got almost 300 of these horses there, and they're pretty easy to see. Hupos, those guys, it's just like they know you're about to raise the camera and they take off on you. But I got them on this rock. I won that round. These are ibex, Siberian ibex at Icknart, young ones. I watched a whole group of about 15 nannies and kids. And I've also started adding people back into my, I like Mongol wrestling, and so I've just started taking a swing at human figures again. And with that, that's my painting kit for when I'm on location. Barla, thank you very much. If you have any questions. So I was very fortunate that my parents encouraged me, and I drew from the time I was a child. So art has always been an important part of my life. And I've never met a child that, starting out, didn't love to draw. And so I always try to encourage that whenever I can. And I think art has a really important place to play in conservation, because people see the world differently when they're looking at art. And it can change how they see the natural world and maybe help them want to become active and help do the work that needs to be done to help save our planet.